We're going to move on to something that is more scarce and in a way more interesting. I think all these wines are extremely interesting, but when I was a student for many years, taste a bottle of monovarietal Graciano was always on my to-do list because they're not that easy to find. So it's great to be able to talk about and taste this variety today. If you study Rioja, then you know that Graciano is a traditional blending partner, but it was on decline for a long time. It was nearly extinct by the end of the last century. And now that's reversing. People are starting to plant it again. Most of it is grown in Oriental. It needs that warmth for consistent ripening. It needs heat. It needs clay soils, which hold that heat in. So that's the spot for it. But people are starting to come back to it. It's always been known for being impactful in small amounts. It adds perfume, acid, tannin, color, all those things that we look for in a big red wine, or to add complexity or interest as a wine age. Those are to be found in Graciano. But Graciano on its own has really not been that common. So it's a pleasure to taste this today. Please, if you haven't, give it a taste now. And I really recommend coming back to it more than once because it changes quite a bit in the glass. This label is Rio Madre. It's a partnership between the Escudero family and Jorge Ordonez, who is a very prominent wine importer. Fine Estates from Spain is his group. Um, so this is a partnership, and the greater label Ilurche was started for younger red and rosé wines to showcase them not as an entry point or a stepping stone to aged Rioja blends, but again as their own thing, as their own special and unique offering. Like the previous wine we tasted, this comes from the Yerga Mountains in Rioja Oriental. So high altitude that moderates the warm climate, um, extra wind that concentrates the sugar and the fruit flavors in the grape. This does have a little bit of time on oak, 4 months. You can tell that it gives a little structural impact, but without overwhelming the fruit. It's a really beautiful color, just as you would expect. And in the nose and the palate, I get some very interesting notes. The fruit that comes to mind for me is bilberry, um, which is not the easiest fruit to find. I've had it in Scandinavia and I've had it in Persian grocery stores. But if you haven't had bilberry, I recommend seeking some out because it really is a very interesting and piquant fruit character. Also, very savory notes here. I get a little bit of black olive. I get smoked paprika. Very interesting, all on the perfume side or the intense side of savory. And then in the mouth, the tannins they're sinewy, they're chewy. They're very muscular tannins, and yet they're not hard. And you can imagine, I think, when you taste this wine, the very careful ripening and the long ripening season that would be required in order to get this wine to be physiologically ripe so that those tannins are not too hard, but that they're just mature enough to preserve the fruit and the acid that's there and also promise some long aging. And I really would I can tell you that this week after we break from this seminar, I'm going to be seeing if I can find this wine for myself because I'd love to get a few bottles of it to age.